The fourth Duke of Newcastle was one of only about 24 dukes at the time, so he was a very important and influential figure. But he had really been formed by the fact that he'd grown up in the shadow of the French Revolution. So the whole of his life and the politics of his life were formed by that major and significant event. The French Revolution had led to a popular debate in Britain about the rightness or not of constitutional change. And Newcastle always made it clear that he sided with the establishment, with the status quo. So what we find at the time of the Reform Bill is the Duke thinking that this was a major attack on the property of people of his class, the aristocracy, and then moving with every mechanism in his power to defend his traditional rights and privileges. Hostile critics, of course, thought he was an unbending opponent of all forms of change and labelled him an ultra or an extreme Tory. This term became increasingly popular during the 1820s, and by the time of the Reform Bill in 1831, Newcastle was notorious in caricatures and squibs and ballads as one of the most prominent ultra-Tories of the period. And it's for this reason, in part, that events in Nottingham took hold so quickly. They saw Newcastle as the embodiment of these political views which stood in the way of parliamentary change. At the time of the attack on Nottingham Castle, the Duke was actually taking part on the debates on the Reform Bill. But it was only the next day, in conversation with the Home Secretary, Lord Melbourne, that he discovered that there'd been an attack. He records his impressions in his personal diaries. In conversation with Lord Melbourne, he told me that he had very bad news from Notts, that Nottingham was in a shocking state and that the rioters had set fire to Nottingham Castle. I have heard nothing about it, and I hope that it is not true, but I much fear that it is. The mob attacked the jails also, it was thought, but his information came only from the guard of the mail coach. The following day, Newcastle finds out more about the attack on the castle. Having received authentic information of the destruction of Nottingham Castle by fire by the mob, of the sacking of Colic, which they stripped of everything and afterwards set fire to, of the audacity of their proceedings, and of the entire impunity with which they have perpetrated all their outrages, I have determined to go to Clumber this evening.